What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back for another search engine optimization tip video. In today's tip video, I'll be walking through duplicate content, why it's bad for SEO, and how to find and fix issues that may be plaguing your website. So duplicate content can be found in one of two forms. The first method in which duplicate content occurs is more obvious when you plagiarize or take existing content from other websites and republish it without any changes on yours. The other main issue that results in duplicate content can come in the form of your own web pages cannibalizing or duplicating one another. So, duplicate content is bad for SEO mainly because it can be confusing to Google as far as them trying to determine what web pages should rank in the search results. So, let's say you have 4 or 5 web pages with the exact or near exact same information and content. When Google is crawling those web pages, it can get confused trying to determine which of them should rank in its algorithm or in its search results. And either A, it may choose to not show any of them, or B, it can hurt your existing keyword rankings because these web pages are fighting in competition with one another. And so it's diluting the SEO authority or link equity that would either otherwise be consolidated into a single page. And it can also, when it comes to duplicate content from external websites on your own website, because that content already exists in Google's index, it's not very valuable to either Google or users because the information is already out there. So those web pages won't rank or be indexed. And so you're losing a lot of organic traffic by having duplicate content on your website if you're plagiarizing or taking direct information, either through syndication of other articles or what have you. So as far as finding duplicate content issues internally on your website, a couple things to look out for. Some of the most common ways in which duplicate content occurs is, one, this happens a lot with e-commerce websites, where you have UTM parameters or URL parameters to filter through inventory. So an example of this is on Macy's, where you have this UTM parameter or URL parameter appended to the end of the URL. So to a normal user, you might think that this is the exact same URL. But in the eyes of Google, this is a totally different URL compared to this URL. So a common solution to resolve this sort of issue is to use what is known as a canonical tag. So canonical tags basically tell Google, let's say you have multiple versions of the same page, like in this example. It tells Google, take version B, C, and D of this page and ignore these and pass any SEO authority or link equity to this main page. So basically you're consolidating that value to allow this main page to rank, and just again telling Google to ignore these other ones, which will help you to avoid a duplicate content issue. Speaking of which, another issue is URL variants. So again, let's say you have https example.com and https www.example.com. You may again think that this is the same URL, but in the eyes of Google, these are two totally separate URLs and unique. So you would implement 301 redirects or any URL variants to point to the preferred version of your URL structure. And outside of that, two other common issues that can cause duplicate content on your website is one, if you have more localized translated content on your website. So let's say your website houses the same content, but it's translated into multiple languages. You would need to implement what is known as a hreflang tag. Basically, tell Google that all of these pages are unique and related to one another, so I can cut down on duplicate content there. The other main issue that can cause duplicate content internally on a lot of websites is through your product page descriptions. So for example, like Rocket Homes, they diversify the descriptions and the information that's found on their product page listings. So that way, these are standalone pages that are unique. A common issue with a lot of e-commerce websites is that their product pages have the exact same information. And so it's vital that these product pages have unique like meta titles, meta descriptions, H1 headers, subheads, and just supporting information. Because if it's all the same, it's not very relevant to Google. It can be difficult for them to determine, what these pages should rank for, and may choose to just not index them. And if they have a lot of thin content as well, Google may say that this page isn't valuable in its index. It may choose to just not crawl or rank it because of those factors. So, one way, or my preferred way to discover duplicate content issues on a website is to use the Screaming Frog tool. It's basically a crawler that will crawl all the web pages on your website and basically point out any issues as far as duplicate content goes for your primary on-page elements like meta titles, meta descriptions, H1 headers, subheads, and it also allows you to crawl for near duplicates on a sliding scale of 1% to 100%. So it's a very easy way to discover duplicate content issues without spending a lot of time or doing a lot of manual work. And as far as resolving duplicate content issues on your website, I kind of walk through a couple of different examples there. The first is, again, to 301 redirect any page variants to a single page if those users on your website shouldn't be viewing those page variants. So again, taking like https example.com and redirecting it to https www.example.com. The next preferred method is, again, implementing Canonicals. So taking this UTM parameter or this URL parameter and adding a canonical that points to the main portion of the URL. So the canonical would point from this URL to, sale/40-60- off-basics/sale. Basically just a signal to Google to consolidate that SEO authority and link equity and tell it to either ignore the UTM parameters or URL parameters and just flag to Google that these are just copies of this master page. And another option is to implement no index tags. So for example, this happens a lot with internal search results, but these pages aren't inherently valuable to Google. So rather than implement a canonical tag, you may choose to no index those pages. What that means is basically telling Google, hey, we don't want you to crawl, or not necessarily crawl, but not to have these pages show up in the search results. So that can be helpful in cutting down duplicate content issues there. And then finally, again, is just to diversify your internal content for your product page listings. So making sure that they are unique and have basically at least like a 50 to 65% uniqueness factor to them. Whether you're including dynamic tags for like locations or inventory listings or what have you. And then if you're looking to check for duplicate content issues on, external websites, you can use a tool called Copyscape. It's a pretty good tool. Basically, you just plug in your URL and it will check for any duplicates across the web in its index. So it'll help you either cut down on potential plagiarism or just duplicate content that's being found on other web pages on Google or Bing or the web, essentially. So Hopefully you found this tip video to be helpful. If you did, be sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all for the next search engine optimization tip video.